At the beginner end, we have a simple 2-ingredient whipped butter, a classic body butter recipe, and for those of you who want something a little more advanced, we'll also be making a full-on emulsified body butter. Oh, and along the way, I will be answering some of the common questions and issues that you can get when making body butters. But let's get this one out of the way first. If you have access to soft, high-quality natural butters, then by all means, just use that. But some butters aren't that great to use directly on your skin, so knowing how to turn any butter into a 2-ingredient whipped butter is essential.
Let's start off with butter selection. I'm using the ever-reliable shea butter, as it's commonly used for whipped butter recipes. It's typically solid at room temperature, but it's still malleable enough to squeeze between your fingers. To our 120 grams of shea butter, pour in 80 grams of the oil of your choice. I'm using a relatively light and nourishing oil, fractionated coconut oil. This is coconut oil with the solids removed so that it stays in a liquefied form. Now you can substitute this with any other oil, but I'd avoid using extra virgin coconut oil, as its volatile consistency will likely mess with the final texture of your whipped butter. Next up, we want to gently melt our butter and oil together over a low controlled heat. I'd recommend using a double boiler or bain-marie method like you see here.
No, microwaves provide direct and uneven heat that can compromise the structure of butters, and good quality natural butters are actually quite expensive and temperamental, so the last thing you want to do is to ruin their natural soft texture. Let's treat them with respect.
As your butter melts, stir occasionally to ensure even heat distribution. Once it's completely melted, transfer to a cool rack until room temperature, and then refrigerate until completely set. The consistency of your butter at whipping stage will determine how good of a final texture your whipped butter has. It should be firm enough to touch, but still soft enough to penetrate with a whisk. If it's too hard, it will be difficult to incorporate air. But if it's still liquid, it will develop an unstable, foamy texture that will deflate over time. Use an electric whisk to aerate the butter. Any household whisk will do. Over time, it should visibly lighten and be easy to mix by hand. Whilst you don't need to add a preservative, I do recommend using an antioxidant to prevent the oils from turning rancid. Vitamin E oil is an easy, natural choice. At this stage, you can also add in any additional fragrance or essential oils to give your body butter a lovely scent. Make sure that your oils are thoroughly incorporated by whisking again. If it's whipped correctly, the butter should be light and fluffy like you see here. It should form soft peaks, but still have enough stability to be piped into a container.
Unfortunately, yes. All butters have a natural melting point, and by adding in oil, we've actually lowered it, making it even more temperamental in hot and cold weather. But fortunately, true body butters, like our next recipe, are a little more stable, and that's why most prefer to use it over a traditional whipped butter.
For our next formula, we're combining butters and other ingredients to improve the feel and texture of our body butter. Here I have coconut butter, which has a similar firm texture to cocoa butter, but it's far less greasy and doesn't have that chocolate smell. You can see it has a completely different texture to the much softer shea butter. To 80 grams of shea butter, add 10 grams of coconut butter. To that, we'll need 10 grams of cetearyl alcohol. Cetearyl alcohol is a fatty alcohol that works to thicken our butter, but also condition the skin. Body butter formulas use this to cut down on the oiliness of traditional whipped butter, but also to provide stability so that it doesn't melt or harden as easily when exposed to different temperatures.
I'm so glad you asked! I've actually made a free formula calculator to help with scaling for this recipe, along with all of my other recipes, which you can find at WholeElise.com.
You'll also find ingredient breakdowns, full written recipes, links to where I purchase ingredients, and just a bunch more helpful information. So click the recipe link in the description box below.
After you finish watching this video.
Once you've measured out all of the solid ingredients, add in 90 grams of your favorite liquid oil. Now I'm using this amazing homemade herbal oil, but that's a tutorial for another day. So subscribe if you're interested in seeing that video coming next. Like before, melt this over a low, gentle heat and make sure that you give it a stir every now and then. When it's done, remove it and cool it before moving on to the next step. Now this is the important part. Once refrigerated, the surface of your butter should be completely smooth and firm. If you notice any lumps or graininess at this stage, don't whip it. Pop it back on the heat, melt it down until it's completely liquid, then refrigerate again until you're back at this step. Don't ignore texture problems, they won't go away. If you're good to go, then whip it until the consistency becomes creamy and light. This will take a few minutes, so be patient. To remove some of that oiliness that you can get with straight whipped butter, you'll need to add a starch or powder. I'm using 10 grams of cornstarch. I actually wouldn't recommend using any more than this, or it gives the body butter a slightly chalky feel. Again, link in the description for more information. Like before, add in your vitamin E or another antioxidant and any essential oils that you'd like for fragrance. Then whisk to create a homogeneous, airy texture. In a side-by-side comparison, you can actually see that this body butter formula has more elasticity to it than the traditional whipped butter. It also pipes oh so smoothly into a container.
Now, some may have told you that you can make body butters in the microwave, freezing it, or just whipping a random butter for an eternity, and they would be wrong. It's this method that gives you that pillowy, soft, light, creamy whipped texture. If you cut corners, your body butter may look good at first, but you'll find that it turns grainy, gritty, lumpy, hard, and honestly, just a waste of perfectly good and innocent ingredients. Which brings me on to our next question. Butters are just solid oils, so it's kind of like asking why oils are oily. Real body butters are always going to be a little greasy, but honestly that's just part of their charm. But for those of you who love the nourishing thickness of a good body butter, but want something that's a little less greasy and more stable, then this next pro-level emulsified body butter is for you.
So the name kind of gives it away, but to make an emulsified body butter, you'll need an emulsifier, as not only does it keep the oil and water ingredients together, but it improves the texture and thickens our body butter at the same time. I'm using 16 grams of emulsifying wax NF. Add this to 40 grams of shea butter. You'll also need 4 grams of cetyl alcohol, along with 20 grams of the oil of your choice. Next, we'll need to mix 1 gram of xanthan gum with 4 grams of glycerin. The xanthan also works to thicken the body butter, but it's actually more important to use as a stabilizer to prevent the water and oil ingredients from separating. Once mixed, add this to a heat-proof container. This body butter comes together in 2 stages, the oil-soluble ingredients in one container and the water in another. To the xanthan mixture, pour in your water and whisk thoroughly so that the xanthan is evenly dispersed. The water will immediately thicken because of the xanthan. Add in the remainder of the water, and if you want a further hydration boost, you can add in a little aloe vera concentrate or floral water. Whisk thoroughly. Now we have the 2 basic components to our emulsified body butter, and we can move on to melting. Ideally, you should use a bain-marie or double boiler like in the other recipes, but to make things easier to see, I've had to sacrifice it. Do this at your own risk. Once both stages are liquid and completely heated through, immediately pour the oil phase into the water phase and use an immersion blender to begin emulsifying your body butter. This will come together really fast, literally in a matter of seconds, so I recommend that you have everything set up before you start melting. If you've ever made one of my lotion recipes, congratulations, but you'll know that it takes a few minutes of blending to form an emulsion. But body butter formulas have a much higher oil content, so this process took around a minute. The body butter will continue to thicken as it cools, so routinely stir and whisk to prevent any lumps from forming. If your body butter doesn't have this uniform creamy white texture, it wasn't blended enough and will likely separate once it's cooled, so it's important to take the time to ensure that it's fully emulsified while still hot. After around 30 minutes of cooling, the emulsified body butter is much thicker and we can move on to the next step. Unlike with the previous body butter recipes, emulsified body butters contain water, so therefore you'll need to add a preservative, or it will mold within a matter of days. Refrigeration won't save you, a broad spectrum preservative is needed. Use it or lose it, people. Again, add in vitamin E alongside any fragrances and whisk thoroughly so that it's fully incorporated. The difference in texture from a traditional body butter is subtle but definitely noticeable. This has that lightness of a cream that you can't quite obtain just by using oils. But in spite of the hydrating elements and lighter texture, this emulsified body butter is still thick enough to pipe and hold its shape.
Emulsified body butters do require more ingredients, and they're not really real body butters, but they do have some obvious benefits. They're less greasy, they're not going to melt in the summer or harden in the winter, and they're usually more affordable to make. Regardless of your preference, I hope that now you'll at least know how to make amazing body butters.